said in that last video, I'm not planning on spending any extra money at the electrical appointment. Famous last words. Hello, welcome back to the next installment of my building diaries. I have had the second of my 2 pre-build appointments, which was my electrical appointment. So all the big stuff is now done and locked in, which is very exciting. The first appointment I had was my color and lifestyle appointment. I did a whole video on that. You may recall I went significantly over budget, which is important context for this video. So if you haven't watched that, I will link it down below. I went into the electrical appointment thinking 2 things: spend as little money as possible, and also how expensive can all of this stuff really be? So much more was covered in an electrical appointment than I thought. I really felt like we had knocked over all of the nitty-gritty bits and pieces in my color appointment, and then there were a few things that I had pre-selected when I initially signed my contract with my new homes consultant. Once again, I kind of thought this was going to be a really quick in and out kind of moment. How wrong I was. I have my laptop here so I can take you through all of the bits and pieces, because if I'm being honest, quite a few of the things that we spoke about in my electrical appointment really went over my head. As with last time, this made it abundantly clear to me how little I knew about what to expect about the building process, which I'm really hoping that these videos kind of help some people with, because as I was sitting in that appointment again by myself, I was just going, oh my gosh, I'm faced with these choices that I don't necessarily fully comprehend or that I've never given any thought to, and I'm having to make a decision in the moment that is going to be permanent for as long as I live in this house, or at least until, I guess, if I did want to change something, until I could afford to change it. I'm making very permanent choices, and that felt like a lot of pressure. The first thing that comes to mind, and also the first thing that we tackled when I went in and sat down and spoke to the girl, was the lighting, the ceiling lighting. Now, I had a nice drawn up floor plan that showed where I wanted pendant lights to go in the house. I had 2 separate locations. I'd marked them out. That was easy. What I had not given any thought to, and something that I literally have not used a single brain cell on in my entire life, is the location of the ceiling lights. I knew that I wanted downlights, and my builder, that is standard. They don't really do the bulb version, which I was very happy about. But beyond, oh, I want downlights, I had not thought about it any further. I had not thought about lighting any further than I want downlights. That was where it stopped in my mind. There were so many things. What type of socket? What type of light? Do you want warm? Do you want cool? Do you want a dimmer? How bright do you want it to be? All those things were things that I could kind of decide on in the moment. The thing that really got me was, where do you want the lights? Like, each individual light that goes into the house, you have to select the placement of that. I was struggling in my mind to try and think about, oh my God, where are the lights in my house? Like, what's, you know, I guess in a hallway, it's really easy. You go, okay, I want them centered down the hall, spaced however far apart. In like a bedroom, she said, do you want 2 or do you want 4? And I was like, I have no idea. I was racking my brains trying to remember how many we have in our current house. She looked at the size and said, I think you can get away with 2. So I did end up opting for 2. And then I came home and I realized that my current bedroom has 4 of them. Have I ever looked up and noticed that? Absolutely not. And then when you get further into the house, because it's a somewhat open layout or floor plan, maybe at some point I'll have to take you guys through that so you can understand what I'm saying. But there were sections where it's not totally squared off. Like in a bedroom, you go, okay, everything's kind of evenly shaped. It makes it simple to figure out some somewhat evenly spaced placement for the lights. But in open spaces like the living, dining, kitchen, where it's more irregular, it became very challenging, especially where the hallway also came into play. And it's like, you kind of can't have too many lights, but you are also paying per light, which is very annoying. And then, so it becomes this like dance of, are there enough? Are they spaced out enough? Is the lighting going to be even? Also, you have to figure out which lights you want to go to which switch. That's a decision that you have to make. So it's like, oh, if I turn on this light, it'll turn on all of the hallway lights. And then if I turn on this switch, it'll turn on the kitchen lights. But then again, in those central areas, the open plan spaces, you're going, oh God, like how do I grid off these lighting in groups that make sense, that are also very practical for the way that you live? And I think this is what's really hard, is because you're thinking about a floor plan. At least for me, it's different to the house that we're currently in. You don't really know how you move about in that space. You don't know what sections of the space you might use more actively than others. And being a very visual person, it was something that I just found very, very difficult to wrap my brain around. We spent a lot of time working on light placement, a lot of time. The other thing that took up a lot of time was figuring out placement for cameras. I knew that I wanted to have a home security system. Ultimately, I decided to not opt for the one through the builder because I wanted to have options, and it was something that I had not researched. They just had one standardized offering that they had. So what I ended up electing to do is having them run the electrical for where the cameras will go and where the hub and everything will be, but not actually physically installing the cameras. And that's something I will pay somebody to do once the handover is done. It is a little bit of that double handling, but they wouldn't install something that wasn't theirs anyway. So unless I wanted to install their brand of camera, I didn't have much of a choice. When you go to this electrical appointment, they basically pull up a map of the house and then they start pinpointing all the different things. Maybe I'll pop mine on the screen so you can see. So they pinpointed where all the lights were, where all the switches were, the different zones of things, and then we were putting in the points of where these cameras would go. You had to try and figure out how much visibility you would need and be able to get from a camera. Obviously, generally speaking, with just like one direct line of sight, but then also considering where you were going to mount it. And that's what we found challenging, particularly for our sides of the house. The front and the back were pretty easy, but the sides, because of the awning and something else, I don't know, it was difficult to place. So I'm hoping that where we've marked them to will allow us for enough like coverage to be able to see in a straight line all the way down the side. But if not, I'm probably gonna have to pay somebody to come back and put in an additional point for an additional camera, which would be super annoying. Another thing that is deeply essential but nobody mentions is your power points. One, you have to pay per power point, which is super annoying. Two, if you want to have like an Ethernet port for computers, TVs, etc., also stupidly expensive. And three, thinking about the placement of everything, you've kind of got to figure out where all your furniture is going to go so that you can figure out where the power points make the most sense. So thinking about the bedroom, for example, you've kind of got to know where you want to put your bed, because most likely you're going to want a power point either side for each bedside table. Same with like desks or freestanding lamps or anything like that. I luckily did have a plan going in that I had worked up with all of the furniture placement and everything with the help of my designer. If I didn't have that, that would have been such a point of panic for me, because I know that PowerPoints are one of those things that if you don't have one, it is so irritating to have to run extension leads. For me, I also wanted to make sure that I had PowerPoints in some kind of unusual places. Like I put one in our linen closet because I knew I wanted to mount our Dyson in there, or I also wanted one in our pantry because eventually I wanted create a benchtop space so we can leave our appliances hidden away there rather than having them on our bench. So those were all things I had to think about. And even just in the pantry, I was like, oh my God, do I put it on the left side or the right side? It doesn't feel like a groundbreaking decision, but not having lived in that space, you go, I don't really understand what would make the most sense. I have no visual on that. And so you're kind of just making a choice out of thin air and hoping for the best. In case anyone was wondering, a regular PowerPoint was $48. And then think about how many PowerPoints you could have in your house. Crazy. And then there was like a fancier version. I don't know what the difference of this was. Obviously they talked me through it all at the time, but that was $300. Oh, and if you want an outdoor PowerPoint, which I did for gardening and stuff like that, that's $136. I spent about $1,000 just on PowerPoints. Just on PowerPoints. I did have a moment that I was not entirely proud of during this process. So we kind of worked through all the lighting. We did like the fans, those bits and pieces, and then we got to heating and cooling. And the girl said to me, okay, here's your home. I've drawn up zone 1 and zone 2 so that you can run like one zone at a time. I was like, oh my God, amazing. I don't have to run the whole house at once. That's great. Important context, probably, I opted for ducted heating and cooling. I had selected that at the time that I signed the contracts for my house. That's something I knew that I wanted. And that cost me $16,424. A lot of money. We're sitting down with this girl. She says, yep, zone 1 and zone 2. Are you happy with those? I said, yep, looks pretty good. Front half, back half. A lot of the time we'll probably run it all at once, but nice to be able to, at night, for example, maybe just cool the front half where the bedroom is, where we'll be sleeping. And she said, oh no, you can only run one zone at a time. And I'm pretty sure my exact reaction was, I beg your pardon? What do you mean I'm paying $16,000 to only be able to cool one half of my house? Yes, it's good to have as an option where you, like I said, at night, maybe you only want to cool your room or the kids' rooms or whatever. But if I'm entertaining, or if it's a 40-degree day like we've just had, if I theoretically have kids in those back bedrooms, are you telling me I have to choose between cooling their rooms or cooling mine? On what planet does that make any kind of sense? And I think she could see the absolute shock in my face, because I was a little bit about to have a little bit of a meltdown and say, oh my God, well, I would never have agreed to this if I knew that that was the case. Anyway, she opened up something, looked into it, and then said, oh, never mind. I figured it out. I had put in something that meant you could have both on at once. And my response was kind of, well, why was that not the option that you led with? You just said to me, I can't have them both on. But clearly there's an option where I can. It just didn't make any sense. And again, I don't know if that's my lack of knowledge in that area, but I've never lived in a house where you could only run one section, heating, cooling. The only time that I can kind of let that slide and see that making sense is if you had a double story and you could run one floor at a time. But I'm building a single story house on a block that's less than 400 square meters. So to me, there is no good reason for that to be an issue. There was one other thing, and I am going to do a bad job of explaining this because, to be honest, I don't fully understand it myself. The girl did take the time and explain it to me, but if I'm being honest, it went in one ear and out the other. Basically, the way that I understand it is, if you think about a house, it can only have so many of something before the electrical grid is overridden. Like, she gave me a number. I think she said it was like, it can have 24 of whatever this thing is. I don't know if it's 24 outlets, 24 point, I have no idea. She was like, yours has 30 something. So what that means is we need to upgrade your system. It also has something to do with the power provider in my area. She said this particular provider is notorious for having more stringent requirements, or I don't really know how that works. But either way, ultimately what it meant is I needed to upgrade from a phase 1 something to a phase 2 something. And I kind of said to her, is there any way around this? And she said no. And I said, okay, no problems. How much will it cost? And she said that will be $2,000, which was not exactly what I wanted to hear when I was working with a tight budget. But it's one of those things where you kind of go, well, if there's nothing I can do about it, there's nothing I can do about it. I have just looked up on my signed contract for the electrical appointment, and it says I upgraded to phase 3 underground power in lieu of single phase to home. Again, I don't really know what that means, but if there's anyone out there that knows more than me, maybe that is helpful to you. So that was a real blow to the budget. I went into this appointment, like I said, hoping to keep costs down, but I was really weighing up, I guess, the cost of having someone come back to do something post-build versus doing it just at the time, particularly for electrical stuff like lights, like the power for the cameras, stuff like that. It would be a lot more expensive to pay a call out fee and then, you know, labor fee for a Sparky to come versus just doing it at the time that they're building, which was annoying, but I feel pretty good about spending that money. To me, it feels worth it. Anyway, the ultimate outcome for anyone who's curious is I had $4,890 budgeted into my contract to spend at the electrical appointment, and I spent $10,081. There's a difference of $5,191, which is a lot of money. Obviously a lot less money than I spent at the color appointment, although arguably I did so much more in that appointment versus this one. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. And so as I said in my last video, as much as I am over budget by quite a bit at this point, it is all still something that is very much within my means. I need to go through and look at all of the contracts because I've had a few variations for adjustments and things like that come through since starting this process. But one of my next videos will be a full budget breakdown on every single cost that I have paid up until the stage of breaking ground for the build, which hopefully will be in the not too distant future. My rough calculation says we are over $20,000 in the red, which is, it is what it is, you know, but we'll go through that at another time. Overall, the electrical appointment was definitely not something I was excited for, but it also definitely was not something that I guess I had a full comprehension of what it was. So hopefully this little summary video can help you feel a little bit more prepared when you go to your own. Just like I said in the last video, I think preparation is key. As much as this is the initial early stages of your build, there is so much assumed knowledge or assumed insight into how you want to live in the house, the things that you want, all that sort of stuff that I just had not considered. And I think having a little bit of foresight and pre-planning on those things would have made the experience less stressful and probably a little bit quicker as well. If you've got any questions, definitely leave them in a comment. I've been so grateful for all of the love and support on these videos. I'm loving this process so far. I'm loving being back on YouTube and documenting it all. And if you've got anything you would like to hear about or any other video ideas you've got, please also share those as well, because I'm trying to really be on top of it this year. Maybe get back to a weekly video cadence. We'll see. I'm going to do my best, but I'm not making any promises or putting any pressure on myself. 2026 is the year of accepting that what I am doing is enough. And so in the spirit of that, I will do my best, but also, you know, not punish myself if I can't achieve the things that I want to, and accept that that is okay. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.